Coming up on tonight's feedback, we'll be speaking with Dr. Stanton Green, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences here at Clarion University. And I'll be talking to you a little bit about Christmas shopping, being that this is our last show before the Christmas break. Feedback starts now. And as I said, coming up on the show today, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Stanton Green, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences here at Clarion University. That's coming up a little bit later. We're going to be talking about education. As last night's show, you know, we spoke quite extensively about education. We're going to pick up on some of those things later in the show. But as I said, I want to talk to you a little bit about Christmas shopping and holiday shopping. Everyone's out there doing that now. Last weekend, I was out with a few friends. We were shopping, not necessarily Christmas shopping, but everyone was out Christmas shopping, and one of my friends had commented to me how they really don't like Christmas, and we all kind of cocked our head like, what are you talking about? Why don't you like Christmas? Well, their point was, well, look at what it's turned into. It's mad rushes at the stores, hunting for a parking spot. It's really not what generally we're supposed to think of for Christmas. So we're walking around the store shopping, you know, and we see these plastic nativity scenes that you can buy and all kind of Christmas trees with the lights done already on them because people don't have time to put the lights on. You know, those were the things that were what Christmas was about. You know, your family would put up the Christmas tree. That's changed. And later that night we were all sitting around just talking. And the one friend who had said she doesn't like Christmas said to me, she goes, you know, my favorite movie's coming on next week, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And I said, you know, it wouldn't a better name for a movie to come out now, and I think I'm going to make the movie or write the book. It would be a great book to have, How the Capitalists Stole Christmas. Because isn't that what it really is now? It's all about buying things. If someone buys you a present, even if you don't like them, you're sort of obligated to buy the present for them. I mean, it isn't just Christmas. I'm sure the same holds true for Hanukkah and other holidays at this time of the year. And it's really turned away from the whole idea of the staying with your family and going home, especially college students going home for the Christmas break. Everyone's rushing around now trying to get the Christmas presents. So I've devised, I'm going to start on the book after the show today. I'm going to go home and write this book, The Capitalists Who Stole Christmas. Last week, you know, I was complaining about everything out there that's to buy, the Pokemon and all of those things. And I said, you know, I was making the joke that we were going to have the Mark Despotakis doll on sale. That'll be next year's craze. But, I mean, it's true. Like I said last week, there's going to be something even dumber next year just so someone can make money. As you know, this is the biggest holiday. The holiday season is the biggest time for companies to make money. I remember reading it last week that retail spending is up by 6% during this time of the year. And look at the economy we have right now. Consumer confidence is up. People are out there spending more money because it's the holidays. I mean, even look at, going back a couple months, look at Halloween, what Halloween has turned into, how people decorate and buy. People are even buying Halloween gifts, I've seen. And it's just, anymore we see so much of everything is, what can I buy for you? Can my gift outdo yours? Can I spend more money on you? Because I know people who have said, oh, well, the gift I'm buying for you is going to cost $20. Well, that means they're trying to say, hey, I expect a $20 gift in return. It's, I just think that's the season has really changed, and I'm going to write the book describing that, about the capitalists who stole Christmas. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, Dr. Stanton Green, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences here at Clarion, will be joining us after this.
In the early years, young children cannot stand on their own. Uniting parents and children is an important part of the life of a community. Stand for Children encourages people to make a personal commitment to stand for the health of children. 300,000 Americans marched in Washington, D.C. last June to support Stand for Children Day. Stand for Children seeks to lift the belief that children need our help to stand.
Who's the man? It's my birthday. I'm the man. It's my birthday.
Exercised lately?
Go for a mouthful, go for the fun.
Come on, go for cake.
Cakes for everyone. Just one stack is what it takes. And it's gopher cakes. Open wide, stuff your face. There's always room for more gopher cakes. Empty the box, then reload. Eat those gopher cakes till you explode.
Exercised lately?
Till you explode.
Hi, I'm Christy Desort.
And I'm Brian Cook from TV5 News.
On behalf of the Tuesday Night News team, season's greetings and a Happy New Year.
Back, little confusion, that's all right. We're here with Dr. Stanton Green, the Dean of College of Arts and Sciences.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. Question for everyone who comes on the show. What's your background? How'd you get to Clarion? How'd you get into education?
Well, my background going back to the beginning is I grew up in New York City, I didn't look forward to it necessarily or plan a career in education, but actually my interest in when I went to college became archaeology and anthropology. So I studied that as an undergraduate and in fact had pretty much a career in archaeology, my first teaching job was at the University of South Carolina, where I was hired as an archaeologist, and I did a lot of teaching of anthropology classes, and I also took a lot of students on field trips and field excavations in the United States and in Europe, was down there about 18 years, but I kind of yearned to get back to the north, and I became the department chair, the chair of anthropology at the University of South Carolina, and started feeling like I could make a difference as an educator and an administrator, and I looked for a dean's job, and that's where Clarion came in. And they decided to take a chance on me. I decided to take a chance on Clarion, and it's worked out pretty well.
How long have you been here?
6 years.
6
This is
years.
my 6th year. Mm-hmm.
What do you think? You like Clarion?
I like it very much.
Okay.
I like it very much. It's a good. It's what I was expecting. It's a large enough university to be really quite interesting. We have, as you know, a comprehensive list of programs that students can be involved with. The College of Arts and Sciences has something like 23 different disciplines that we address, and yet it's small enough that there's a community. People know each other, and it's nestled in a small community. And of course, it's beautiful out here in western Pennsylvania.
So what is your role? What do you do during the day?
What I do during the day? Well, it's hard to describe a dean's job, but basically I'm in charge of administering the college, which means that I'm in charge of issues such as, and I hate to say this because you'll jump right at me, scheduling of courses.
Yes, I will.
The staffing and scheduling issues, budgeting issues. What I've been working on right now, for example, one issue is computer upgrades for faculty, computer upgrades for the computer labs, and other technology upgrades, equipment, so forth, things like that. I coordinate with the chairs of the departments on all kinds of things like that. And my day is pretty busy doing those kinds of things.
Well, back to the scheduling.
I shouldn't have opened that one.
Anytime I have anyone from the university on, and people I know, ask them about scheduling. Why is it that students have such a problem here with that?
Well, let me start with a story that goes back about 30 years. I remember my first experience with scheduling of college classes was when I was about 15, actually, because my older cousin was the first cousin of my generation to go to college. And I remember being home once, and she came home, and she was enrolled as a freshman at Queens College in New York City. And she came home crying her eyes out because she couldn't get the classes she wanted. That was about 30 years ago. I say that because really scheduling is a very difficult problem, and so within a general context, I know students are frustrated by it, but it is an issue that's kind of partly a problem because of how complicated it is. But I can give you some specific reasons why I think scheduling is somewhat difficult at Clarion. One is that we have a very liberal, open-ended general education list of courses and requirement, which is a good thing. But what it means is that students have lots of choices. What ends up happening to a certain extent is that students kind of follow each other, and they follow their advisors. And part of the problem is many of them don't see their advisors, but those that do follow their advisors and follow their friends into the same courses. So it's sort of like if you had 4 or 5 airplanes that were ready to fly from Pittsburgh to Atlanta. Everybody wanted to be on the same 2 airplanes, and just a few wanted to be in those other 3. There's plenty of seats for everybody, but the seats are kind of being pre-selected by people. So we have this kind of, it's almost some way a philosophical issue, which is one of the philosophies of Clarion is to give the students lots of choice, which means that faculty offer a wide variety of courses. But one of the problems is that students often choose the same kinds of classes. So we're working on it very hard, and we are getting better at it. And one of the things we're trying to do is to do a better job of scheduling freshmen when they come in. For example, freshmen now get an English and a mathematics class right away. It wasn't always that way. So we get that out of the way. When I first came here, there were a lot of juniors and seniors that hadn't taken their English composition class and their freshman math class, and that wasn't good. So it's very complicated, and I know students are somewhat frustrated by it. I can tell you that a lot of the faculty and certainly people in my office work hard at it, and we are certainly willing and somewhat able in most cases to help students out. But it'll be a continuing problem. No one has it perfect.
Well, I'm sure you'll continue to get feedback from students if it's working or not.
That's right. Absolutely, we'll get feedback.
So I also understand you're a published author, writing some things in sports.
Yes, my latest. I've published a variety of things in archaeology, but recently what I've been doing is working on the area of baseball and American culture. That's become an interest of mine. As an anthropologist, I'm interested in American culture. And I've always been a baseball enthusiast and spent a little time on your sports talk show here, and I'm sort of, some people might say, a baseball fanatic and how closely I follow it. But one of my interests is how baseball reflects American culture, how it interacts with American culture. Just as an example, I've written a paper on how baseball during the 20th century has been an important force in immigrants basically becoming Americans, Americanizing, some people call it, or assimilation processes. And if you look at the decades and you look at the waves of immigrants, you'll see, for example, there were periods when there were Irish Americans immigrating, and there were a lot of Irish baseball, a lot of Irish ball players, Italian Americans, Jewish Americans, and so forth. Nowadays, you see a lot of that reflected in, for those people who know about baseball, you see a lot of, for example, Latin players, Sammy Sosa, a lot of people from Dominican. You see players from Asia, Japanese players, Korean players, and this pattern, if you look at the pattern of immigration waves in the United States, and you look at baseball, you see a lot of similarities. One of the things I'm also interested in is the not necessarily the good things that baseball reflects. Because baseball, of course, I'll always love it, but it's like everything else, it's good and it's bad. And I gave a paper recently at a conference on the Negro Leagues, which of course were the leagues that were formed starting, the major formation was in 1920, between 1920 and 1950. And of course the reason the Negro Leagues were formed is because African Americans were not allowed to play in the major leagues. So there you see baseball reflecting American racism. So I talked about that as well. So I'm able to pull those two things together, my interest and passion for anthropology and my interest and passion for baseball, and it really works out nicely for me.
So how does the sports part play into your role as the dean, not necessarily as an anthropology fan, but as the dean?
Well, I'm not sure how it plays out directly, although I know that it's a topic of conversation. People like to talk to me about it, and I was in Clarion magazine, and they had me in a baseball uniform and so forth. But it does give me an entree to talk about culture, and that's what I use it for, because baseball, lots of people like to talk about baseball or sports in general, and it gives me an entree to talk about culture, because that is relevant to my deaning. Because one of the things I like about being the dean is that I work with people across all kinds of disciplines, and in many ways the different disciplines are like different cultures. Artists behave differently than physicists, and anthropologists in some ways will act different than say people in communication. They see the world differently, use different languages, and that's what anthropologists would call culture.
Right. All right, well, we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about some general education things going on in the world, get your take on some things. So we'll take a break and be right back.
With the holidays just around the corner,
We would like to extend our season's greetings.
And a Happy New Year to all of our viewers.
in the new millennium.
We will see you back here in February.
Introducing new frequent phone hours.
Use the phone just 8 hours a week and get this free phone cradle. Use it 12 hours and get a speakerphone.
Use it 15 hours and get this cool headset.
Or stay on the phone 20 hours a week
And get a pasty complexion.
flabby body, and a great new nickname at school.
Exercised lately?
As the holiday season nears and the smell of chestnuts roasting,
And the falling snow are making this holiday season a special one.
I'm Christy Herman.
And I'm Dave Marsh from the Wednesday Night News Team. Season's greetings and happy holidays from all of us here at TV5.
It's not just about making plans. It's about making a difference and taking an interest, not just earning it. At Edward Jones, it's about more than investing. It's about knowing you.
My every hope, my life, my world, it all begins with a dream.
Edward Jones, investing in you and your dreams.
In Clarion, see Gary Martin, located on Main Street. Phone 226-7896.
All right, and we are back talking through the break about the baseball culture and baseball. And the thing that we were just talking about right before we came back was how we've all done Little League. Every one of us has done Little League, and obviously that promotes some competition. Is that healthy? Is competition healthy that young?
Well, I think that competition in a limited degree is healthy, but I think the kind that you see in Little League can be unhealthy. And I know my experience in Little League was rather traumatic. And I remember sitting, being in right field and not wanting the ball hit to me. And I've seen Adam Sandler do exactly that same kind of routine and relate to it 100%. I remember my mother shouting from the stands to run faster, to run faster, to run faster, and wanting to do that because you want to please your parents. So I think that competition, it reflects American society, but I don't think it's necessarily a healthy thing, especially with young kids.
Bridging that into education, I see it every day in classes. There's competition. Well, I got a 93 on the test. Hey, I got a 94. I did better than you. I mean, that is obviously it's such a small menial thing, but it's caused this huge amount of competition for the number or for the grade. What do you think of that?
Right. Well, that's definitely not healthy, and I think that if I had my druthers, if I was the king and could change things, the chancellor or whatever, whoever does these things, I would get rid of grades, because grades really, in many ways, corrupt the entire system. But you can't do that in a vacuum, because obviously there are a lot of things that need to be changed. But grading, from the point of view of little kids through universities, really is not a very effective way of feeding back information to students.
In my high school, the year before actually the year after I graduated, they started what they were calling the senior project. The kids were still graded, but you had to do a paper, and you had to present yourself before a board of some administrators and teachers, as well as you had to shadow some people in a potential career. There was no grade on that, and people, what I heard the whole time, that's stupid, why should I do it? But I think that's extremely valuable. I think by the time you're out of high school, you should be able to speak before people and be able to write a paper.
Right.
What do you think?
I agree completely. It's interesting because this issue of the project has become a big thing in education now in high schools. I heard an entire radio show actually driving back from Thanksgiving from New Jersey on this on one of the radio stations. And I have a son who's in junior high now who in fact is involved in a project. The critical thing with a project is it has to have meaning for the students, and that's really the key. If something is felt like, if students feel like it's not worth anything, then that means something is not being communicated, because something has to have meaning. And that's the case with education in general. Students have to be part of their learning process. If people are just telling them things, then the reaction is generally, well, why do I have to do this? I have one of my sons who uses the word pointless a lot, and I tell him sometimes, well, you know, so you just got to grin and bear it. In some cases, I have to agree with them that it may be pointless. But in other cases, I can explain to them why it would be a good thing, because we don't know as children, and even as young adults in college, necessarily what's good for us. But it is the teacher's absolute responsibility to get that point across to people.
Right. But you know, I find in classes that doesn't always happen. And are we staying too much inside the square that okay, she wrote this on the board, I have to memorize that exactly, and when it comes up, I have to write it verbatim. Right. You know, I worry about, like, I specifically try not to do that, just because I want to be able to think. I have to process. People aren't processing, I think, what they need to.
That's exactly right. I mean, that is not learning. Memorizing is a very basic form of learning in a technical sense, but it's not going to do you all that much good. Basically, what needs to be going on in the classroom is that students have to be involved in their learning. There are various forms, kind of, in some ways, kind of technical terms for them, such as cooperative learning, where students work on projects together with the guidance of the teacher. The teaching takes on more of a coaching kind of approach as opposed to a preaching kind of approach. And we generally tend to be preachers when we should really be coaches. It doesn't mean that there isn't room for me to tell you things if I'm the professor about anthropology or archaeology, but that shouldn't be the whole thing.
Right.
You should be learning about it, and I should be empowering you and making you able to learn about it. And that is the critical thing in my experience at a number of universities, is that in most cases, and in high schools and junior highs, and even going back down to maybe, you know, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, is that it's very passive. The teacher tells the student writes down what the teacher tells them and remembers it for 3 minutes, and then crams it so they can remember it long enough to take the test and get that grade you're talking about.
Right. Last night, you know, we did the whole show on all these education topics. I was showing you some of the books, and the one author I spoke with, basically his point was to get rid of public schools, and wanted to go just totally with private schools in the country. And I want you to maybe listen to his reaction on this. His reasoning why, I asked him, why are private schools better than public schools? Let's listen to that.
One of the biggest advantages is freedom. Parents will have freedom. Today, every big decision about their child's education is made by a stranger, a bureaucrat. That seems outrageous in the United States. The public schools were founded really as an assault on families. If you go back and read what the founders of the movement for what was known as the common school had to say back then in the 1830s and 40s, Horace Mann, for example, in Massachusetts, they all thought that parents were basically rotten people. We had to get the kids away from them. So it was founded as an anti-family institution. They thought the politicians, the bureaucrats, the intellectuals were superior, they were anointed, they were wiser. So the thing was minimize the time that the kids spent with their parents, get them into government-approved schools. And so the first thing that total privatization would do is restore parental freedom and responsibility. And that includes financial responsibility, because responsibility that doesn't include financial responsibility is bogus. Parents need to be writing checks to schools, because in that way they will realize that there's something of value they're giving up for their kids' education, and therefore they will really care about it. If something is free, or if it appears to be free, it's cheapened in the eyes of people. And that's what's happened to education. It's free, it seems to be free, it seems to be given to them. It's not really free. The bill is packed into the tax bill, but it's just not very visible. And so it's cheapened in their eyes. So it will restore freedom. The second thing it will restore is real quality and creativity, because we'll have entrepreneurship. People will be free to come up with new ideas and offer them in the marketplace to parents. And so we'll get a blossoming of creative ideas, things that bureaucrats will never come up with. We just know it. Bureaucrats are just not very good at coming up with creative solutions to the problems. So I think those are two pretty good things, freedom and creativity.
Well, all right. What do you think?
Well, that's a lot to chew on, but I'll give you my response. First of all, it's very cynical, and I don't know where this cynical interpretation of the common school comes from, but let me respond to a couple of things, maybe moving backwards from the last thing you said. no one thinks public education is free. I grew up in a household where my parents knew every tax dollar they were spending, and they would vote on budgets and so forth. I don't know where he comes up with this idea. People in America are very tuned to taxes, maybe too much tuned. Maybe in some cases they don't want to pay taxes that they perhaps should be paying. But the notion that people think of public schooling as free, I think, is a totally bogus argument. The other thing is that I think that public education, I take a very different view from him. Public education, to me, is the foundation of American democracy. I don't think it's necessarily working as well as it can work, and I am sometimes a rather severe critic of how it's working, but to eliminate it would be very dangerous, because what it would do would mean that you were taking away the access of everybody to the common good, and even though it may not be the common best, it's still the common good. So I think that his argument is rather problematic from those two perspectives, at least.
Well, I said to him, I said, well, isn't that a bad idea? You're obviously going to be limiting people from being educated. That's a fine idea, because then those people, they don't want to be in school. Well, so then they can go up and learn a trade, and then maybe someday when they want to continue their education. And my thought is, well, that's just going to dumb down society. Sometimes I think we've been dumbed down too much, and that might do it even more.
Well, I think you're right, and I do think that there need to be some choices. And one thing that has occurred since my parents' generation, probably your grandparents' generation, is that there used to be more choices. For example, people did have the choice of going into the trades, becoming apprentices, but they also did, in fact, go to school. My father is a good example. Was a first-generation American. He went to school through high school. He went to a vocational high school. It was a high school. He did his reading, writing, arithmetic, history, etc., but he also learned to become a printer. So you had that combination of the liberal education with the vocational education, and that is really essential. And if you look at I hate to use the term, the millennium, you know, the new millennium, the 21st century. I mean, we're so much into a knowledge-based society that what you're going to be doing is depriving people of the ability to create knowledge, and that's going to put them at tremendous disadvantage. There still should be room, I think, for people to do real things. You know, we still need people to build houses, to be good carpenters and furniture makers and plumbers and everything else, but you need to have that liberal education.
And just like the millennium is over, we're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
We'll be back right after this. And we're back. This is our last show for you before February. We'll be back with you in February. We hope you've enjoyed all the season, everything we've done this year. And as I said in my holiday greeting, you saw just a little bit. Happy holidays, and we'll see you back here in February. Thanks for watching.